Captain Lee Jinho wiped the sweat from his forehead as he looked across the strange landscape of Kepler 4b. 3 months had passed since the first human colony ships arrived on this distant world. The planet was supposed to be empty. The surveys had shown no signs of intelligent life. It's just rocks, dirt, and endless purple grass that swayed in the alien wind. But now everything had changed. Dr. Park, Minji knelt beside a massive crystal formation that jutted out from the ground like a frozen lightning bolt. The crystal was taller than 3 men standing on each other's shoulders. It glowed with a soft blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. She ran her scanner over its surface for the 100th time that morning. "This makes no sense," she said, shaking her head. "The readings are completely impossible." Engineer Kim Do-yeon climbed down from his equipment platform and walked over to join them. His clothes were covered in dust and his hands were stained with grease from the drilling machines. "The ground-penetrating radar shows these formations. Go down at least 500 meters, he said. Maybe deeper. Cannot reach the bottom with our current equipment." Captain Lee looked around at the dozen crystal spires that surrounded them. Each one was different in shape, but identical in that strange blue glow. They formed a perfect circle in the valley floor. The colonists had discovered them by accident when they were looking for water sources near the new settlement. "Do you think they are?" Lee asked. Dr. Park stood up and brushed dirt from her knees. "That is the problem. My equipment says they are at least 3 million years old, but look at them. They show no signs of weather damage, no erosion, no cracks. It is like they were made yesterday." Kim pointed his tablet toward the nearest spire. "The energy readings are getting stronger. Whatever these things are, they are not dead. Something inside them is very much alive." A low humming sound began to fill the air. It was so deep that Lee felt it in his chest more than he heard it with his ears. The 3 humans looked at each other with worry. "It is new," Park said quietly. Before anyone could respond, the sound of vehicles approaching made them turn. Toward the ridge, 3 strange machines were coming down the slope toward them. The vehicles looked like nothing Lee had ever seen. They floated above the ground without wheels or legs. Their surfaces were smooth and silver like liquid metal. "Human contact protocols," Lee said quickly. "Nobody makes any sudden moves." The vehicles stopped 50 meters away. Doors opened that had not been visible before. Tall, graceful beings stepped out. They had long limbs and pale skin that seemed to glow slightly in the sunlight. Their eyes were large and completely black. They wore simple robes that moved in the wind like water. One of them stepped forward. When it spoke, the words came not from its mouth, but seemed to appear directly in their minds. "We are the Valith. You're the humans from the metal ships in the sky." Lee stepped forward slowly. "I am Captain Lee Jinho. We come in peace." "We did not know anyone lived on this world." The Valith being moved closer. Its movements were so smooth, it seemed to glide rather than walk. "We do not live here. We are guardians. We've watched over this place for many generations of our people. You must leave this sacred ground immediately." Dr. Park could not contain her curiosity. "Sacred? To whom? What is this place?" "This is a temple of stars. It was built by the star-touched ones in the time before memory. The crystal formations you see are only the smallest part. Beneath the ground lies a structure of great power and greater danger." Kim looked at his tablet screen. "The energy readings are climbing. Something down there is waking up." Thawed. Guardian, who had introduced herself as High Priestess Valara, turned to look at the crystals. For the first time, her mental voice carried emotion. "Fear. It should not be happening. The temple has been silent for thousands of years. Your presence here has triggered something that was meant to stay sleeping." Lee felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of something, the Oracle? It's the great intelligence that lies at the heart of the temple. It was placed there by the star-touched ones to wait for their return, but they never came back. They vanished from the galaxy long before our ancestors learned to speak. Park stepped closer to the nearest crystal spire. The blue glow was definitely getting brighter. An artificial intelligence from 3 million years ago? Not artificial, Valara corrected. The Oracle is something beyond your understanding. It holds the memories and knowledge of the star-touched ones. It knows secrets that could reshape the galaxy. That is why it must not be awakened. The humming sound grew louder. Now all the crystal formations were pulsing in unison. Deep beneath their feet, something vast was stirring to life. Kim looked at his instruments with wide eyes. "Captain, the power levels down there are incredible. Whatever this oracle is, it has more energy at its disposal than our entire colony fleet. You must leave now," Valara insisted. "Call your people from the sky. Take your ships and go to another world. Forget you ever found this place." Lee looked at his two team members. Park was practically vibrating with scientific excitement despite the obvious danger. Kim was already thinking about how human technology might interact with whatever lay beneath them. Lee himself felt the weight of command. His job was to keep his people safe. But his job was also to explore and learn. "Cannot just leave," he said finally. "This discovery could change everything we know about the galaxy, about who came before us, about what is possible." "You do not understand," Valara replied. Prophecies speak of the star-touched ones returning at the end of days. They will reclaim what was theirs and reshape the galaxy according to their will. If the Oracle awakens and mistakes you for them—" She did not finish the thought. She did not need to. The ground beneath their feet began to vibrate slightly. Dust fell from the crystal formations. In the distance, more Valeth vehicles were approaching, many more. Park grabbed Lee's arm. "Captain, we have to at least try to communicate with it. This could be the greatest archaeological discovery in human history." Kim nodded. "The technology down there is beyond anything we have ever seen. If we could understand even a small part of it." Lee looked up at the sky, where he knew the human colony ships waited in orbit. Thousands of people were counting on him to make the right decision. But what was right? Safety or knowledge? Caution or courage? The crystals pulsed brighter. The humming grew deeper. Somewhere far below, something ancient and powerful continued. To wake up after sleeping for millions of years, Captain Lee Jin-ho made his choice. 2 days had passed since Captain Lee Jin-ho made his decision to stay at the temple's site. The Valeth had not been happy about it. More than 50% of their floating vehicles now surrounded the crystal formations in a wide circle. They had set up some kind of energy barrier that shimmered in the air like heat waves. Commander Shinhound stood beside Lee on the small hill overlooking the temple. She had arrived that morning with 20 human soldiers and enough equipment to set up a proper research base. Her dark eyes studied the alien perimeter with the cold focus of a career military officer. "They are not going to let us through, Isley," she said. "That barrier looks like it could stop our vehicles. Maybe even our weapons." Lee nodded. "High Priestess Valara has been polite but firm. She says we can study the crystals from outside the circle, but we cannot go any closer to the center." "Oh no. And what does Dr. Park think about that?" They both looked down at the research camp where Park was working with her team of scientists. Even from a distance, they could see her moving between instruments and computer screens with barely controlled excitement. "She thinks we are looking at the discovery of the century, and we are being stopped by superstition." Lee replied. Engineer Kim Do-yeon climbed up the hill to join them. His clothes were dirty and his hair was messy from working all night, but his eyes were bright with the look of someone who had figured out an important puzzle. "Captain, you need to see what we found," he said breathlessly. They followed him down to the main research tent. Inside, Dr. Park was standing in front of a large display screen. The screen showed a three-dimensional map of the temple area. But this map went deep underground, much deeper than anyone had expected. "Kim managed to get our power cables connected to one of the outer crystal formations," Park explained. "The moment we fed electricity into it, the whole temple network came online. Look at this." The underground structure on the screen was massive. It stretched down over a kilometer and spread out in all directions. There were chambers and corridors and vast open spaces. But most interesting were the walls covered in symbols and images. "The outer chambers are full of information," Park continued. "Star maps. Charts showing the locations of every known intelligent species in the galaxy, including us." Lee stared at the display. "What?" "It is impossible. These temples are millions of years old. Humans only left Earth a few hundred years ago. That is what makes this so incredible," Park said. She touched the screen and zoomed in on one section of the map. "Look at this. The human section of the galaxy is marked with special symbols, different from all the other species. Scout Choi Minsu entered the tent carrying a cup of coffee and looking tired. He had been on perimeter watch all night, keeping an eye on the Valith forces. The aliens are getting nervous, he reported. I have been listening to their communications with our translation software. They keep talking about prophecies and the end times. Commander Shin frowned. What kind of prophecies? Before anyone could answer, a new voice spoke from outside the tent. May I enter? I have information that might help you understand. They turned to see a young Valith standing at the tent entrance. Unlike the other aliens they had met, this one wore simple clothes instead of ceremonial robes. He looked nervous, but determined. I am Kelvin, he said as he stepped inside. I am a student of the old texts. I believe you should know the truth about what you have found here. High Priestess Valara would not be happy to learn that one of her people was talking to the humans. But Kelvin had made his choice. He moved to the display screen and looked at the star maps with wonder. These match the ancient writings perfectly, he said quietly. The prophecies speak of the star-touched ones who seeded the galaxy with life long ago. They created many species but kept one special bloodline for themselves, the people who would inherit their power when the time was right. Park leaned forward. What people? The prophecies call them the children of the third star, a young species that would rise from a small blue world and spread across the galaxy. It would be recognized by their curiosity, their courage, and their ability to unite different peoples. Under one banner, the humans looked at each other. Earth was the third planet from its star. Kim cleared his throat. The temple is responding to our presence more each day. The energy readings keep climbing. It is like something inside is trying to wake up. The Oracle, Kelvin whispered. The great intelligence left behind by the star-touched ones, it has been sleeping for millions of years, waiting for the children of the third star to return. Lee felt a chill run down his spine. We are not the star-touched ones, we are just humans trying to survive in a dangerous galaxy. Are you? Kelvin asked. Your people have spread across more worlds in a few centuries than most species managed in thousands of years. You make friends with aliens that other races fear, but you adapt to any environment. You never stop exploring, never stop asking questions. Tell me, Captain Lee, what makes you think you are just ordinary? Before Lee could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the camp. Commander Shin grabbed her radio. Port, she barked into the device. Commander, the temple is activating. All the crystal formations are glowing brighter than we have ever seen. The Valith barrier is fluctuating. There is something else. We are picking up signals from deep inside the structure. It sounds like ... like someone trying to communicate. Everyone in the tent rushed outside. The crystal spires were blazing with blue light, so bright it hurt to look at directly. The Valith vehicles were moving around frantically. Their energy barrier was flickering on and off like a broken light bulb. Deep beneath the ground, something was stirring. The humming sound that had been barely noticeable before was now loud enough to make the ground vibrate. Birds flew away from the area in panic. Small rocks began to roll down the hillsides. High Priestess Valara appeared at the edge of the human camp. Her usual calm was gone. Her mental voice carried fear and something that might have been awe. It is too late, she said. The Oracle is awakening. The prophecies are coming true. Children of the third star have returned to claim their inheritance. Doctor. Park grabbed Lee's arm. Captain, we have to get inside that temple. If the Oracle is really trying to communicate, we might be the only ones who can understand what it is trying to say. Commander Shin shook her head. It is too dangerous. We do not know what we are dealing with. No one has been waiting for us, Lee said quietly. For humans, specifically. Maybe it is time we found out why. The crystal formations pulsed in unison. The humming grew deeper. And from somewhere far below, a voice older than human civilization began to whisper in languages that had been forgotten for millions of years. Captain Lee Jin-ho looked at his team. Then at the Valith, who had tried to warn them, then at the ancient temple that was calling to him. He made another decision that would change everything. We are going in. Captain Lee Jin-ho stood at the edge of the Valeth energy barrier. The shimmering wall of force had been flickering for the past hour as the temple's power grew stronger. Dr. Park Minji and engineer Kim Do-yeon stood beside him, their equipment, bags ready. Commander Shinhound had argued against this plan, but Lee had made his choice. The barrier is weakening, Kim said, checking his scanner. Whatever is happening down in that temple, it is interfering with their technology. High Priestess. Valara approached them with several other Valeth elders. Her mental voice was filled with worry and something that sounded like resignation. If you are truly the ones from the prophecies, then perhaps this was always meant to happen, she said. But know this, Captain Lee. Once you enter the temples, there may be no going back. The Oracle has waited 3 million years for this moment. Lee nodded. You understand the risks? Do you? Asked Elder Council member Thaxon, an ancient Valeth whose skin was almost transparent with age. The star-touched ones were beings of incredible power. They could reshape worlds with their thoughts. They could travel between stars in the blink of an eye. If the Oracle mistakes you for them and grants you their full inheritance. He did not finish the sentence, but everyone understood. That kind of power in the wrong hands could destroy civilizations. The barrier flickered once more and then collapsed completely. The Valeth vehicles pulled back to a safer distance. Lee, Park, and Kim walked forward into the circle of crystal formations. The moment they crossed the threshold, everything changed. The air itself seemed to hum with energy. The grass beneath their feet glowed softly, and from deep underground came a sound like singing, though no human throat could have made those notes. The entrance should be near the center of the circle, Park said, consulting her tablet. The scans show a shaft leading straight down. They walked past the towering crystal spires toward the middle of the temple site. As they got closer, the blue light from the crystals grew brighter. The singing grew louder, and Lee began to feel something strange, like someone was watching him from very far away. At the exact center of the circle, the ground began to change. What had looked like solid earth started to glow and then became transparent. Beneath it, they could see a shaft lined with the same crystalline material as the spires above. Steps had been carved into the walls, leading down into blue-lit depths. Invitation, Kim said quietly. Lee went first. The steps were sized for beings much taller than humans, so each one was a significant climb down. But the crystal walls provided handholds, and the blue light made it easy to see. Park and Kim followed close behind. They descended for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. The shaft went straight down for hundreds of meters before opening into a vast chamber. When they emerged from the stairway, all 3 humans stopped and stared in wonder. The chamber was enormous. The ceiling disappeared into darkness high above. The walls were covered in flowing scripts and images that seemed to move and change as they watched. But most impressive was the center of the room. A massive crystal formation rose from the floor, like a frozen tree. It was at least 50 meters tall and pulsed with that same blue light. But this light was different. It was alive. It moved through the crystal-like liquid, forming patterns and shapes that were almost like thoughts made visible. The Oracle Park whispered, as if responding to her voice. The crystal tree blazed with sudden light. The singing they had heard from above became a chorus of voices speaking in harmony. And then, impossibly, the voices began to speak words they could understand. Welcome, children of the third star. We have waited so long for your return. Lee stepped forward. We are not who you think we are. We are humans from Earth. We only discovered this place by accident. The light in the crystal pulsed faster. Accident? No, Lee Ginho, of the human people. There are no accidents in the great pattern. You are exactly who we expected you to be. Lee felt his blood turn cold. The Oracle had spoken his name, his full name, in perfect Korean. How do you know my language? How do you know who I am? We know because we have been watching. We know because it was written in the code of your very existence. You carry within your genes the mark of the star-touched ones. All humans do. You are their children, grown and changed and made ready to inherit what they left behind. Dr. Park pulled out her scanner and began taking readings. Captain, Energy patterns in this crystal are unlike anything in our database. It is not just artificial intelligence. It is something more. We are the collected consciousness of the star-touched ones, the oracle continued. Their memories, their knowledge, their dreams of what the galaxy could become. We were placed here to wait for the day when their descendants would be ready to take the next step in evolution. Kim looked around at the chamber walls where images were flowing and changing. What happened to them? The star-touched ones. They transcended physical existence 3 million years ago, but first they seeded the galaxy with life. They guided the development of countless species, and they saved their most precious gift for last. A young species on a small blue world, a species with the curiosity to explore, the courage to face the unknown, and the wisdom to unite rather than conquer. The oracle's light began to pulse in rhythm with Lee's heartbeat. The singing voices grew louder, and suddenly images began appearing in the air around them. Images of Earth as it was millions of years ago. Images of early humans learning to use tools, to speak, to dream of the stars. You were guided, but never controlled. You were protected, but allowed to grow naturally. Everything you have become, you became through your own choices. And now, you are ready for the final gift. What gift? Lee asked, though part of him was afraid of the answer. The knowledge to unite the galaxy in peace. The power to heal worlds torn by war. The wisdom to guide all species toward a better future. This is your inheritance, Lee Jinho. This is why the star-touched ones chose humanity above all others. The crystal tree blazed with light so bright that all 3 humans had to shield their eyes. When the light faded, the oracle's voice was weak and fading. But first, you must choose. Power without wisdom leads to tyranny. Knowledge without compassion leads to destruction. The galaxy will know what has happened here. They will fear you, or worship you, or try to destroy you. What will you do with the gift we offer? Lee looked at Park and Kim. He thought about Commander Shin and the soldiers waiting above. He thought about the human colonies spreading across space. He thought about the Valeth and all the other alien species who shared the galaxy. With humanity, the Oracle was waiting for his answer. The decision that would shape the future of every living thing in the galaxy rested in the hands of one human captain standing in an ancient temple beneath an alien world. We choose wisdom, Lee said finally. Choose to unite, not conquer. We choose to heal, not destroy. The oracle's light pulsed once more, and then the great crystal began to crack and crumble. 3 million years of waiting had finally come to an end. But as the oracle collapsed, its final message was already spreading across the galaxy. Every species, every world, every civilization would soon know the truth. The star-touched ones had returned, and they were human. Admiral Song Kyung-ho stood on the bridge of the human battleship Harmony, watching as alien fleets gathered in the space around. Kepler 4 to be. In the 3 days since the oracle's message had spread across the galaxy, over 40 different species had sent ships to this remote world. Some came out of curiosity, others came out of fear, and a few came with weapons ready. Sir. We have incoming transmission from the Galactic Confederation flagship, reported Communications Officer Han Giwan. Supreme Overlord Zinth wants to speak with you directly. Song nodded. Put him through. The main screen flickered and showed the imposing figure of Zinth, leader of the most powerful alliance in known space. His species, the Corvani, were 8 feet tall with gray skin and 4 arms. Their empire controlled over 300 star systems. Admiral Song Zinth began, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. By order of the Galactic Confederation, you will surrender all humans currently on the planet's surface. You will turn over all data and artifacts recovered from the temple site, and you will withdraw your ships from this system immediately. Song kept his expression calm, and if we refuse, then you will face the combined fleets of 12 major civilizations. Your species has already caused enough chaos. Half the galaxy is in panic. The other half is preparing for war. Religious cults are declaring humans to be gods. Economic markets are crashing as everyone wonders what the star-touch technology will do to existing trade routes. On the planet below, Captain Lee Jinho was dealing with similar problems on a smaller scale. The human research camp was now surrounded by representatives from dozens of alien species. Some wanted to worship the humans, others wanted to study them. A few wanted to arrest them for crimes against galactic peace. Dr. Lim Naeong, the human geneticist who had arrived with Admiral Song's fleet, was working frantically to understand what the Oracle had done to them. Her preliminary tests were showing impossible results. "Captain, you need to see this," she said, pulling Lee aside from the crowd of alien diplomats. "I have run genetic scans on everyone who is in the temple chamber with you. The Oracle did not just give you information. It activated dormant genetic sequences in your DNA." "What kind of sequences?" "I do not know yet. But they are clearly artificial. Someone engineered these genes into the human genome millions of years ago and then turned them off, until now." Lee felt a chill run through him. Ever since emerging from the temple, he had been experiencing strange moments. Sometimes he could understand alien languages he had never heard before. Sometimes he could sense the emotions of people around him. And once, when he had gotten frustrated with a broken piece of equipment, the machine had simply fixed itself. "Are we still human?" he asked quietly. Dr. Lim looked at her scanner readings. "Genetically, yes. But you are becoming something more. All of you who were exposed to the Oracle are showing signs of enhanced mental capacity, improved physical coordination, and something that looks like low-level telepathic ability. How long before these changes become permanent?" "I estimate a few weeks, maybe less." Lee looked around at the chaos surrounding their camp. If humans were actually changing into something more than human, the galaxy's reaction would only get stronger. Fear would turn into outright terror, and terror often led to violence. Fleet Admiral Baek Taeyong, the highest-ranking human military officer in the system, called an emergency meeting of all human personnel on the planet. They gathered in the main research tent, while alien ships continued to arrive in orbit. "The situation is getting worse by the hour," Baek began. "Intelligence reports suggest that several species are forming a military alliance specifically to contain the human threat. They are calling it the Preservation Coalition." Ambassador Han Juan, the human diplomatic specialist, looked grim. "I have been in contact with moderate leaders from 15 different species. They are willing to negotiate, but only if we agree to strict limits on our access to Star-Touch technology." Engineer Kim Do-yeon raised his hand. "What kind of limits?" "Complete surrender of all temple sites, permanent human observers on all our colonies, and mandatory genetic screening to prevent the spread of what they are calling the star-touched mutations." Lee felt anger rise in his chest. The emotion was so strong that several people in the tent stepped back from him. He forced himself to stay calm. "They want to make us prisoners in our own space," he said. "They are scared," Han replied. "Can you blame them? From their perspective, humans have just been revealed as the inheritors of the most powerful civilization in galactic history. And some of us are already showing superhuman abilities." Dr. Park Minji, who had been quiet during most of the meeting, finally spoke up. "Has anyone considered that maybe the other species have good reason to be afraid?" Everyone turned to look at her. "Think about human history," she continued. "What do we do when we find a new technology? We use it. What do we do when we find a new world? We colonize it. What do we do when we meet a new species? We try to understand them, but we also try to control the relationship on our terms." "Are you saying we should give up our inheritance?" Kim asked. "I am saying we should be very careful about how we use it. The Oracle gave us the power to unite the galaxy in peace. But power is power. It can be used for good or evil depending on who wields it." Fleet Admiral Baek looked at the reports coming in from his intelligence officers. "The decision may be taken out of our hands. The Preservation Coalition is demanding that we leave this system within 24 hours. If we refuse, they will attack." "How many ships do they have?" Lee asked. "Over 500, from 12 different species. We have 47 ships in the entire human fleet." The tent fell silent. Even with their new abilities, humans were Still vastly outnumbered by the rest of the galaxy, if it came to war, they would lose. "There is another option," said a new voice from the tent entrance. They turned to see young priest Kelvon, the Valeth, who had helped them understand the prophecies. Behind him stood High Priestess Valara and several other alien representatives. "Option?" Beak asked. "Tell the galaxy the truth," Valara said. "Not just that humans are the inheritors of the star-touched ones, but what that really means. The Oracle did not make you into conquerors. It made you into teachers. The power you have received is not meant for war. It is meant for healing."
Doctor.
Lim looked up from her genetic scanner. She might be right. The mutations I am seeing are not combat-oriented. They seem designed to enhance communication, empathy, and problem-solving abilities. "The star-touched ones were not warriors," Kelvin added. "They were gardeners. They planted the seeds of civilization throughout the galaxy and then stepped back to let those seeds grow naturally. That is what you are meant to do as well." Lee felt something click into place in his mind. The Oracle had not given them weapons or armies. It had given them the ability to understand other species better, to communicate across barriers of language and culture, to find solutions that worked for everyone instead of just for humans. "So what do you suggest we do?" he asked. "Go to the Preservation Coalition fleet," Valara replied. "Meet with their leaders face to face. Show them that you are not the monsters they fear. Prove that humans can use star-touched power responsibly." Admiral Song's voice came over the communication system. "Captain Lee, we have an incoming message from Supreme Overlord Zinth. He is offering to meet with human representatives on his flagship." Under a flag of truce, Lee looked around at his team. At the aliens who had become unexpected allies. At the human military officers who were ready to fight but hoping they would not have to. "Tell him we accept," Lee said, "but not just human. Representatives, we bring our friends with us." The next few hours would determine whether humanity's inheritance would lead to galactic unity or galactic war. Captain Lee Gin-ho was about to find out if the Oracle had been right about human wisdom. President Park Jin-woo sat in the conference room aboard the Galactic Confederation flagship, surrounded by the most powerful beings in known space. The emergency session had been called after Captain Lee's meeting with Supreme Overlord. Zinth had revealed something unexpected. The Oracle's awakening had not just affected humans. Similar temples on dozens of other worlds were beginning to activate as well. "The situation has changed," announced Zinth, his forearms gesturing at the holographic display, showing the galaxy. Red dots marked locations where ancient temples were coming online. There were hundreds of them. "This is no longer just about humanity. Something is happening across the entire galaxy." General Kong Hai-jin, who had arrived with President Park, as part of the human diplomatic mission, studied the display with the trained eye of a military strategist. "The pattern is not random. The temples are activating in sequence, starting from the outer rim and moving toward the galactic core." Captain Yu Seung-wan, commander of the human exploration vessel Discovery, had spent the last week investigating some of the newly activated sites. His report was both fascinating and disturbing. "Each temple contains similar technology to what we found on Kepler 442b," he explained, "but they are all different in design and function. Some seem to be libraries of information, others appear to be terraforming stations. A few look like they might be weapons." "Weapons?" President Park asked with concern. "Not in the way we usually think of weapons. More like tools for reshaping matter at the molecular level. The kind of technology that could turn a barren rock into a garden world, or could do the opposite." Supreme Overlord Zinth leaned forward. "These temples are responding to human presence specifically." Captain Lee, who had been quiet during most of the meeting, finally spoke up. "Not exactly. They respond to anyone who carries star-touched genetic markers. But so far, only humans seem to have those markers." Dr. Lim Naong, who had been analyzing genetic samples from across the galaxy, confirmed this with her latest findings. "I have tested DNA from over 50 different species. Humans are unique. We all carry dormant star-touched genes. No other known species has them." "Which brings us back to the original question," said Elder Council Member Thaxon of the Valeth. It. What do the humans intend to do with this inheritance? All eyes turned to President Park. As the elected leader of humanity, the decision ultimately rested with her. But she had not come to this meeting alone. Behind her sat representatives from the human colonies, the military, the scientific community, and even some of the alien species who had become humanity's allies. Before I answer that, Park said, I want everyone to understand what we have learned about the star-touched ones and their true purpose. She activated her own holographic display. Images appeared showing the galaxy as it had been millions of years ago. Empty, lifeless. Just stars and planets floating in the void. The star-touched ones were not conquerors. They were gardeners on a galactic scale. They traveled throughout space, finding worlds that could support life and then carefully seeding them with the building blocks of evolution. They did not create life, but they gave it every possible chance to develop and flourish. The display changed to show the galaxy as it was today. Thousands of inhabited worlds, hundreds of intelligent species, a vast community of life spanning countless star systems. Everything you see here exists because they made it possible. Every species in this room, including humans, carries some trace of their influence. But they did not want to be rulers or gods. They wanted to be teachers who would eventually step aside and let their students find their own way. Captain Lee stood up. The Oracle told us that the final test was not about power. It was about wisdom, about what we would choose to do when given the ability to reshape the galaxy according to our will. And what have you chosen? Zinth asked. President Park smiled. It was the first time she had smiled since arriving on the Confederation flagship. We choose to follow their example. We choose to be gardeners, not conquerors. She gestured to the human delegation.
Captain,
you will lead a joint expedition to map and study all the activated temple sites, but the expeditions will include scientists from every species willing to participate. The knowledge we find will be shared freely. General Kong stepped forward. The human military will provide security for the temple sites, but under the oversight of a multi-species council. No one nation or species will control access to star-touched technology. And the genetic changes happening to humans who have been exposed to the Oracle? Asked a representative from the Andromedon Collective. Dr. Lim answered that question. We are establishing research centers on 12 different worlds. Any species that wants to study the star-touched mutations is welcome to participate. Our goal is understanding, not exploitation. What about the temples that appear to contain weapons technology? Zinth pressed. President Park's expression grew serious. Those will be sealed until we can be absolutely certain they can be used safely. And when they are opened, it will be by joint teams with representatives from every major civilization. No species, including humanity, will have exclusive access to technology that could threaten galactic peace. The conference room fell silent as the assembled leaders considered the human proposal. President Park had essentially offered to share humanity's greatest discovery with the entire galaxy. To give up the exclusive advantage that the star-touched inheritance might have provided. Young priest Kelvin was the first to speak. The prophecies spoke of the children of the third star bringing unity to the galaxy. This sounds like a path toward that unity. High Priestess Valara nodded in agreement. The humans are choosing wisdom over power, just as the star-touched ones did long ago. One by one, the other species representatives began to voice their support. Not all of them were completely convinced, but most were willing to try the human approach rather than risk a galactic war. Supreme Overlord Zinth was the last to speak. The Galactic Confederation will support this proposal, but we will also be watching carefully. If humanity shows any sign of using their inheritance for conquest rather than cooperation, this alliance will end immediately. President Park nodded. We understand. And we welcome the oversight. Power without accountability leads to corruption. We do not want to become the very thing the star-touched ones chose to transcend. 3 months later, Captain Lee Jinho stood on the observation deck of the new research station orbiting Kepler-4 for 2b. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see ships from dozens of different species working together to study the temple complex below. The changes in his own body had stabilized. He could now communicate telepathically with other humans who had been exposed to the Oracle. He could understand most alien languages without translation. and he had an intuitive grasp of complex scientific concepts that had once been beyond him. But more importantly, he could sense the emotions and intentions of others around him. It made deception nearly impossible and cooperation much easier. The Oracle had not made humans into super soldiers. It had made them into super-diplomats. Dr. Park joined him at the observation window. She was leading one of the joint research teams studying star-touched biotechnology. "The preliminary results are fascinating," she said. "It looks like every species in the galaxy has the genetic potential for star-touched enhancement. Humans just happen to be the trigger." The trigger? Think of it like a lock that needed a very specific key. Human DNA was that key. But now that the lock is open, the enhancement process can be adapted for other species, if they choose it. Lee considered this. So eventually everyone could have these abilities? Eventually. But it will take generations. And it will only happen if each species chooses it for themselves. The star-touched ones built in safeguards against forced evolution, watched as a Valeth research vessel docked with the station. Kelvin emerged from the airlock, now wearing the insignia of the new Galactic Archaeological Council. He had become one of the leading experts on star-touched culture and philosophy. "Any word from the deep space expeditions?" Lee asked as Kelvin approached. "Interesting news," Kelvin replied. "Captain Yu's team found something at the temple site in the Andromeda sector. Not a weapon or a tool, but a message. The star-touched ones left instructions for the next phase of galactic evolution." "What kind of instructions?" "Coordinates. Locations of other galaxies where life might be developing, places that could benefit from the same kind of careful guidance that our galaxy received millions of years ago." Lee felt a familiar stirring in his chest. The same feeling he had experienced when he first saw the crystal formations on Kepler 44b, the call to explore, to discover, to help life flourish wherever it might be found. "They want us to become gardeners too," he said quietly. "Not just humans," Park added. "All of us. Every species working together to spread life and wisdom throughout the universe." Lee looked out at the busy space around the research station. Humans and aliens working side by side, former enemies becoming friends, old fears giving way to new hopes. The star-touched ones had waited 3 million years for this moment, for the day when their children would be ready to take the next step in the great work of nurturing life throughout the cosmos. Captain Lee Jin-ho smiled as he watched a joint human